Greetings, friends, family, and survivors. That is the sucker hole. You see the blue in the background? It's a little bit blue right here. We call them sucker holes because sure enough, you're seeing through the thin clouds and it's really valley fog coming up the mountain where we are. And it's blue and you go, well, it's going to burn off and be clear today. But what happens is you can kind of see a strip of fog right there. As the sun heats up, it heats the Earth's surface, the fog comes up off the valley floor. And we can go from clear here, and then valley floor fog rises up all afternoon and obscures the sun until about 3 o'clock. Just in time for it to set over that mountain right there at 3:45. This time of year, so yeah, they're sucker holes, and even though it's supposed to be dense fog until 10 and then gradually clearing through the afternoon, that might be true in the big city, but that's not true here in the mountains. And that's why we've got a generator. Yep. So I wouldn't run the generator today, except it's Monday, and Monday is laundry day. Now that's the most fuel efficient generator you can imagine. There's only one that is more fuel efficient when you read all the stats, and that's the Yanmar L40, and this is the L70, and this is as fuel efficient as you can imagine, and that has 5.5 years 100% off grid on that generator. And I never kept track of the hours. I'd say between 150 and 300 hours a year, and it just hardly uses any fuel, and that's the most efficient thing I can run. But as long lasting as those Yanmar engines are, they're expensive to replace. They're not very expensive to rebuild, but they are expensive to replace. So I'm assuming when it goes down, I'm going to have some downtime. And that makes it just really easy to switch over to that one. And when I first went off grid, I was trying to take some of the load off of this. So I got one of those Predator engines for $99 and threw a cheap alternator on it, and it was a backup. And you've seen me go through several different tests with different kinds of generators. I've had Onan in here. I've had Onan on propane. I've had several other different generators experimenting, and nothing has compared to that one. So there's times when I really like to not have to listen to it. It's extremely fuel efficient, but it runs 3,600 RPM. It is a diesel. It's got over 20-to-1 compression ratio, so there's engine noise. And there's times when I just don't want to listen to it. So today I'll probably run that one, and it's very quiet. It's 1,750 RPM. It's not working very hard, and I have a 65 amp alternator, and I run it at about 30 amps, about a 50% duty cycle, and I can run it 24/7 that way without it overheating. And someone has said, why don't you get a 100 amp alternator? Well, my plan is to get a MRAP alternator. The price is coming down on them. They're brushless, military, 400 amp, and I believe it takes 23 horsepower to push them to full capacity. That one with my spare diesel engine like this is probably what I'll put together at some point using the system that I just built. So I've had a couple of different engines on this application, and the alternator and the controller is just an experiment with seeing how fuel efficient I can get using alternators. And I tell you this straight up, that an alternator is the poorest efficiency you can imagine. The truth is, if you've got a good generator that has a 300 volt peak to peak on the sine wave and a power factor corrected inverter charger, you're charging your batteries as efficiently as you can. Charging through an alternator and exciting the field, I think the efficiency of a car alternator, and it doesn't matter whose amperage or what design, I doubt you'll ever get a 50% efficiency. So that said, the goal here today isn't the most efficient form of generating power. Today's goal is I don't want to listen to the noise. We're just a few days away from the winter solstice, and I've burned 4 gallons of diesel and 1.5 gallons of gasoline so far since September. So really that's not very much generator time. Let's put it this way, it hasn't broken the bank. And by the end of February to the 1st of March, first week of March, I'll say goodbye to the generator for the year. So it's not that big of a deal. So let's look and see what we've got going this morning. The batteries are at 51%. We will have at least a bright sky today. I'm imagining even if we don't see the sun today, that'll be up around 80% by this evening, but we're doing laundry. So I might as well start a generator. Now to explain this a little bit better, and I'll take you down to the generator room and show you the DC generator that we put together. This is a 100 amp continuous duty solenoid, and I'd rather use a magnetic starter like contactor because they don't heat up as bad, but they're a little more expensive, and this one was like I think $16, and it's continuous duty. It was actually designed for a golf cart, so you know when you're going from one hole to another on a golf course, you know that's quite a bit of load, and the coil is probably pulled in, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes in between each hole at the golf course. So they would get some downtime, but it's rated for continuous duty, and I can touch it with my hand and hold it. It's warm, but it's not baking hot after a couple hours. So I don't know how long it'll last, but it was only 16 bucks. And here again, efficiency isn't the most important part, but you did see it was 0.47 amps, so less than half an amp for the coil voltage on that. I did not test what the control power is on this guy, but this has worked really well. What it does is I've got it set where it will not charge unless you're above 24 volts, and when it sees 28.3 volts for 60 seconds, it opens, and then when it sees 28.2 volts for 60 seconds, it'll close again. So that keeps this from shattering on and off. And I have yet to put the relay together that will ground the coil out on the engine. So I think it's going to work pretty good. It's pretty reliable. It's charged the batteries pretty consistently, and I'm watching it open circuit, keeps from overcharging the batteries. And yes, these BMSs will open, no question, but they open circuit at a higher voltage, the open circuit at pretty close to 4.2 volts per cell, which is full charge for my battery chemistry. And they don't even balance until you're at 4.17, and that's so they're top balance. And really they're there as a safety. It'll keep me from overcharging and undercharging these batteries. That's their function. I have active balancers coming because these JXTs, these balance wires, are tapped into the same as these. And so I'm going to put active balancers on there that actually take the high cell and put it to the low cell rather than bleeding it off with a resistive load. And the active balancers will work through the full range of the battery. So from its lowest voltage through its highest voltage, it's active balancing. And it has an 1.5 amp balance circuit, and that's better than these guys by quite a bit. So that's going to be my cheapest way of knowing what's going on and protecting the system. And so this controller here is only so that I don't overcharge using my DC generator in manual mode, because I use a 25 ohm rheostat and I dialed the current up and I walk away. And if I didn't have that, it would charge these batteries right up against these things going into open circuit. Now, here's something that you want to be aware of with the BMS. If you're charging with solar, what these guys don't like, let's say this thing's charging, you know, anywhere from 5 to 60 amps output, and suddenly the battery side is open circuit. You can fry the board in this thing. And that's what would happen if the solar charge controllers are charging the batteries and it's charging high enough that the BMS is open circuit. That's going to open circuit your solar charge controller under load, and it says right there in the manuals, they're not under warranty if you do that. So high charge below where these things are going to open circuit. That's one reason. The other reason is I want more longevity out of the batteries. And that's all that does, is it allows the alternator to disconnect from the batteries when I want it to at my set point. And it was very inexpensive to build. And like I said, lithium ion has made living off grid very boring. There's nothing to do, so I went ahead and put that system together for under $100. And it's something that I may be using down the road on a different property. And it's a property that has really good wind potential, and I have a good old school wind generator with a wood prop, and it outperforms all this PMA junk like you can't imagine. And anyway, I may use it for that. But the nice thing about that is you can hook anything up that can charge your batteries, and that'll keep you from blowing stuff up. So it's a valuable thing to have for under $100. So I'm going to fire it up, and it's going to see 25.7, and so it's going to be above 24 but below 28.3. So the solenoid is going to close here in another few seconds, and I'm going to go down and start the generator and let it warm up. Let's clear out the data logger. just gotta admit that that's just a whole lot more pleasant to listen to than the diesel. And the diesel will fully charge the batteries in 2 hours. And this one takes about 4.5 hours, closer to 5 hours, to charge the batteries at 1750 RPMs. So, yeah, the diesel is quite a bit cheaper. The gas tank on the gas engine is 1.4 gallons. So you're paying $3 a gallon for that, and the diesel is going to run about a quart. And I think I paid $2.20 for off-road diesel when I bought it last. So there's no comparison in efficiency, none at all. But sometimes it's not about the most fuel efficient and cost effective. It's about noise. And that's something to consider when you're living off-grid in the Pacific Northwest, where your sunny days, according to the weatherman, look like this. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Have a blessed day.